This particular video is for people who are in the 12-step program. And so the topic I'm going to speak about is a healthy pride, a positive self-image. Now, a few weeks ago, one of the brothers asked me, what topic are you going to speak about? And I couldn't remember the second part of it. And so I said, healthy pride. And he looked at me and said, is there such a thing as healthy pride? But then when we have positive self-image connected with that, then it kind of makes sense. A number of years ago, I was living in Victoria, and I went to a talk by a Muslim woman, and she said, the first 40 years of our life, we focus on pride, building up ourselves. And then we spend the next 40 years on humility. Now, what she was really saying by that is, when we're in school, we have to have some level of pride to make friends. We're going to compete in different sports, and so we have to have a level of pride. Maybe in our teenage years, we'll go for a job interview to get some sort of job, so we have to have pride there. Then eventually we go off to college or university, or we have to get maybe another job, and so once again we go through another job interview, or just the whole application to go to a university or college takes a level of pride. And then possibly we're going to seriously date someone, so you got to have a level of pride. You have to have the pride to ask somebody out and to trust that they're going to say yes. And then eventually you're gonna be at a very professional job interview, where you really have to present yourself, all your good qualities. And then once you hit 40, maybe 41, you realize you need to be humble. And for the next X number of years, you work on your humility. But we also recognize how important it is to have a positive self-image of ourselves. And it's not that we think of ourselves a lot. We actually think of ourselves less, as C.S. Lewis says. But we have to have that positive self-image of ourselves, because there's a lot of things that will work against us if we don't. So I'd like to go through a little outline, a little introduction on what I'm going to speak about in this video. And so the first part I'm going to speak about are the tips for healthy pride and a positive self-image. The second thing is seeing life as a gift rather than personal performance or personal performances. And then coming from the fifth step, or after the fifth step is complete, you can look the world in the eye. And then the final thing I'm going to speak about is walking hand in hand with the God of your understanding. And so the first tip that I'm going to speak about maintaining healthy pride and a positive self-image is stinking thinking. And we get all kinds of negative thoughts in our head. Obviously we have a bad image of ourselves. And so we have to develop different habits in order to overcome these thoughts. And one of the best ways that I have done in my life that helps with this is what's called Taizé prayer. Now, Taizé prayer are short hymns that are repeated, and you repeat them over and over again. At first I didn't quite understand this form of prayer. I was like, well, why do you want to listen to the same song over and over again? But what it does for you is that it really embeds that song into your heart. And so sometimes I'll go for a walk and these different Taizé hymns will come back to me. It's a way of calming my inner being, especially the mind that sometimes goes a million miles an hour. I remember one time, this was in the Edmonton Friary, I was kind of in a bad space, and I'm cleaning the bathroom, and I'm kind of within my own heart, I've got all this negativity going on. Why don't the brothers clean up after themselves when they use the bathroom? How come no one else in this friary is doing any house chores? And I was just really stuck. And then all of a sudden, one friar from a distance kind of walked by, and he said, "Thank you for cleaning the bathroom." And it kind of switched my inner being. I started to recognize what a blessing it was to be able to clean the bathroom, to have the strength to do such a thing, but also that thank you from the outside was quite meaningful. And so sometimes it does take somebody else to say something to us that gives us that change within our own mind of this stinking thinking. A number of years ago, when I was chaplain at a women's prison, I met this one woman named Kelly. Now, Kelly, no, I'm going to call her Kelly. Kelly was in the maximum security part of the institution, and she wanted to change rooms. She wanted to change prison cells. One of the women had been released, and so there was one room that was available. And so Kelly wanted to move into that room. And so she asked one of the officers if she could move to the other room. And the officer simply said no. And so, the officer left the unit, and then she came back on the unit. And so Kelly kind of had a little bit of a debate about this situation and pleaded with the officer, can I move rooms? And once again, the officer repeatedly said no. And then just a few moments later, over the intercom, it was time for count. So count is when everyone has to go to their room to be counted so that you can account for everyone to make sure everyone is accounted for. And so Kelly just sat on the unit and she was not moving back to her room. So there was a repeat that please go back to your room, go back to your cells. And Kelly sat there. And then one of the officers came onto the unit and told her from a distance, Kelly, you need to go back to your room. And Kelly said, no, I'm not moving. So the officer left the situation, and then Kelly, she lost it. And anything that she could, she was throwing it this way, that way. And what really happened with Kelly is that she had allowed these negative thoughts to stew, and then she exploded. Now, likely we've all experienced similar experiences to this. Each of us has likely gone through this at least once in our lives, probably twice. And I was able to meet with Kelly a few days later, and she was handcuffed. Now, the one thing that Kelly did is she did a lot of artwork. A lot of her artwork was quite dark, but I realized that it was a way for Kelly to express herself. And so we each have to find some way to express our negative ideas or negative feelings that are within so that we don't have these explosive moments. The other tip that I like to speak about is accepting a compliment. Sometimes because of stinking thinking, somebody might give us a compliment. Like I could have complimented Kelly for her beautiful artwork, but if she's in the midst of stinking thinking, she's not going to be able to really accept my compliment. And so we really have to really accept people's compliments and simply say thank you for your compliment. Now that seems pretty easy, but sometimes we define ourselves by our thoughts, and most of our thoughts do not become words, do not become actions. And so if somebody gives us a compliment, we have to accept that. And it's similar to when we offer a compliment, we hope that the person will graciously accept that as well. The next tip that I like to speak about is that we will not please everyone. Here at the Friary, at the Mount, some of the friars like the heat between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit. And some of us like it between 15 and 20. I put myself in that category. And so there's constant battles about the heat in the house. And, as the maintenance supervisor of Mount St. Francis, I get the friars looking at me. Are you going to do something about it? From one end or the other. And I realize I'm never going to please all the friars. And that's just the reality of life. And so we ought to not try to please everyone. And we really, if we think about all of humanity on this planet, we will not please everyone. We may have even a great idea that we think is beneficial, and people will shut it down. And that's just the reality of life. And so we ought to live the way that we believe, the way that we're led by the God of our understanding as we go about our day and we carry out the activities that we set out to accomplish. The other thing that we don't want to get involved in if we want to have a good, healthy pride and positive self-image is not to play the blame game. A few years ago when I lived in Edmonton, every now and again a photo radar ticket would end up on the bulletin board. Now, in the Friary in Edmonton at the particular time, we would write our names down when we wanted to sign out a car, and you just simply take the keys and you go on your way. Of course, you'd have to sign out ahead of time because sometimes somebody else was using that car. And so, in a particular week, you could drive, 3 cars, just depending on the situation. And so the one time a photo radar ticket ended up on the bulletin board, the one friar is demanding that someone come forward and accept responsibility for the ticket. And I pleaded innocence right at the very beginning. I'm like, no, it wasn't me, 100%. I put my hand on the Bible. And then later on, I'm in my room and I was thinking about it, and then I realized, oh my goodness, that was me. And so later on, that friar, he's still kind of looking around like, okay, who's going to fess up? And so I put up my hand and I said, you know what? I know whose ticket it is on the bulletin board, but I'm not at liberty to say who it is. And so it got left at that. The other tip for keeping a healthy pride and a positive self-image is solutions. Now, what I mean by that is, we can be critical in life. We can express our opinions that are against other people, but we better present a solution. Because sometimes just to complain about things with no solution, is ineffective. And sometimes if we complain about different things and we don't at least do something in our lives to change the situation, then why are we complaining? And so there needs to be a solution. And a very good expression that relates to this is think globally, act locally. Now, we can't solve all the world's problems, but if we're learning about different things about our world through social media, through the news, then hopefully we do something locally to make our society a better place. Now, I'm going to use the example of my brother. My brother lives in Japan, and when he moved to Japan, he started playing hockey. Now, he never played ice hockey when we were growing up. We would play out in the backyard, hockey on the snow or the ice with our boots on. But he never played ice hockey. But when he moved to Japan, he started playing ice hockey. And so he has 2 children, and they both play ice hockey. And so obviously he's there to watch them play their games. And he's a little bit critical with my niece. He feels that she could be a little bit more aggressive in her game. Really hustle after the puck when it's like right in front of her. And then the one day my brother was on the ice with my niece, and so my niece's team were playing with some of the parents, and so they divided up the teams. There was four young people with 1 parent on each team, and so my brother was on my niece's team. And so at one point in time, he was playing defense, and he was clearly in bad position, and there was a forward that was going to get the puck ahead of him, but out of nowhere my niece skated by him and actually took the puck. And so really the solution of the situation was for my brother to step on the ice with my niece and then see that, oh wow, she's actually a better player than you are. And so what right do you have to say anything from the stands? And as somebody who used to play hockey and also ref hockey, I would often tell people that the view of the game up in the stands is a lot slower, or the game is a lot slower than on the ice. So just to keep that in mind. In other words, the game is a lot faster on the ice. And as a ref, you cannot see everything that the fans can see from a a better view. I often thought that we as referees ought to be in the stands making the calls, not necessarily on the ice. Although somebody's got to drop the puck. Now, the other thing in life is we don't want to set the bar too low. Sometimes we just go through life and we just go mediocre, but we want to be able to challenge ourselves at time. And so right now I'm currently writing a book, and I'm not really a writer of books. This will be the first time I take on this task. But how it came about is I did a video series a number of months ago, and somebody watched the video series and encouraged me to make it into a book. Now, this woman is going to help me make the book, thanks be to God. But and this is a 20 video series, so in other words, there's going to be 20 chapters to this book. So I'm on the 4th chapter of this book, and I'm ready to throw in the towel. But I'm reminded that the profits from this book will go to different charities, and so I'm being mindful of the poor as I write this book and struggle through this book. The other thing I like to speak about as a tip to keep a positive self-image, it comes from somebody I used to work with. And this was also in a prison. And this gentleman, what he would do is he would sit the person down on one chair, and then he would put another chair out in the center of the room, and he would get the person to speak to oneself. But you're speaking to the person of history. Because, a lot of times when people end up in prison, they have a hard time accepting a compliment. They have a hard time of having a positive self-image. And so he encouraged them to speak of the person of history. And I saw this on 2 different occasions, and the women who were speaking to basically an empty chair spoke very kindly to themselves. And it kind of reminds me that we're often very hard on ourselves, and yet we'll be kind to our friends and our family members. And so we need to treat ourselves in the same way. And so that could be a good practice to just speak to yourself as if you're in a chair. And chances are you're going to encourage yourself, which is a good, healthy thing to do. Now, the other way to keep a positive self-image is self-care. There's always a fine line between selfishness and self-care. But we have to look after ourselves. And if we look at the 12 steps, a lot of the 12 steps deal with ourselves, so that we can eventually, in the 12th step, we can serve the community, or we can give back to the community. And so a couple of things that I do is around 4 o'clock, and this was encouraged by Brother Jerry, who used to live here, I go either outside and get some exercise, or I go to our gym and get some exercise. In other words, I get moving. And I'm not really much of an afternoon person, and so this is a good time for me to exercise. The other thing I do is at 9 o'clock, I step away from my cell phone, I step away from the TV, I step away from my computer, step away from the technology, so that I have about an hour to unwind before I go to bed at 10 o'clock. And we just, once you get into a routine of these different things, it can help you to have a healthy pride and a positive self-image. Now I'd like to shift to see life as a gift. Sometimes we have a positive self-image of ourselves because of what we can do, whether that's some sort of sport or whether that's our job that we have. But we recognize, I won't be able to downhill ski for my entire life. I mean, or I may not have a particular job for my whole working career. At some point, I'll retire. And if I define myself by my activities, then at a certain point, I'm going to end up in despair because I can no longer do those activities. So what we want to do is we want to shift and see that life is a gift. Now, I did nothing at all to arrive at being a human being. I cannot give myself any credit. I didn't barter with anyone. I didn't barter with God to have life and end up here. Here I am. It's a pure gift. And so what I have to do is, whether I'm 2 years old or I'm 102 years old or somewhere in between, I have to see life as a gift. And then and in that, I will see everyone else I meet as gift, regardless of their personal performance in life. In the fifth step, once you've done the fearless moral inventory, you've shared it with another human being, you have unloaded a lot of heavy stuff on your heart, and most people, they feel good after a fifth step, and you can look the world in the eye. And that's a good thing. And probably more importantly is you can look at yourself in the mirror. You can look at yourself in a positive way. And really it's because you don't define yourself by all the activities you did in the past. You have to define yourself each and every moment. And so by offering those things, letting them be removed from your heart, you're giving a chance to look the world in the eye, especially look at yourself in the mirror. Now, of course, the 12-step program is a spiritual program, so you recognize we have a positive self-image and healthy pride because we walk hand in hand with the God of our understanding. Sometimes we just witness the presence of God in our lives, and if God is present to us through all that we've gone through in life, that in itself gives us a positive self-image of ourselves, that this amazing being is willing to be a part of my life, and we cannot help but give thanks. And so I hope that you can apply some of these tips for positive self-image to your life. So just to recap, and maybe one of them you have to work on a little bit more than the others. So the first one is stinking thinking. Second one is accepting compliments. Third one is people pleasing. Fourth one is the blame game. And the fifth one is criticism without a solution. The other thing I'll challenge you with is to be mindful of 3 people in your life that you see as a gift. And just take a few moments to compliment that person. And the other thing is just take a few minutes to trust in the God of your understanding. So thank you for watching this video, and blessings in your recovery.